This message comes from Silversea. What if there was another world out there? What if traveling further brings you closer? Explore the Earth with Silversea on intimate ships that show you what most miss. To learn more, visit silversea.com.
Just a heads up, this episode contains discussions of suicide. What's good? You're listening to Code Switch. I'm Gene Demby.
Dominique Foxworth is my name. I'm a former NFL player and former president of the union.
If Dominique's voice sounds familiar to you, that's because you've probably heard it on the show before. He was in our episode about the NFL's Rooney Rule, and he was talking about the slave auction-y vibe of going through the NFL draft combine. You might have heard him on last week's episode when he was talking about the very real physical consequences of playing football for players even before they get to the pros. So after his tenure in the NFL as a player, Dominique became the head of the NFL Players Association. That's the union for NFL players. And in that role, he advocated for players' rights. Like so many people in the United States, Dominique wanted to be in the NFL since he was a child. He was a college star at the University of Maryland, and he had a really, really productive career as a pro. He retired around 30 years old, which means he had a pretty long run in the league, given that the average NFL career is just a little over 3 years, at least according to the NFL Players Union.
When fans think about football players, they think about, I don't know, Tom Brady, Joe Montana, or even somebody like Jerry Rice. Like, you think about these guys who had these great, long, successful careers, and you can see them on TV, or you can see them walk around and they seem fine. That ain't the majority, you know?
Dominique said most players have to retire early because football is just so hard on the body. He said he sometimes jokes to his wife that, his forgetfulness might be from too many hits to the head during his playing days. And he also said that she doesn't really love those jokes. Because what we know now is that NFL players are far more likely to suffer from CTE, that's chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and these other degenerative brain diseases like ALS and dementia. These diseases are linked to a whole host of symptoms: memory loss, impulsive behavior, aggression, depression, suicidal ideation, a loss of motor control. CTE is likely caused by repeated blows to the head. And a lot of the symptoms don't start showing up until long after these players have hung up their cleats. When he was the head of the NFL Players Union, Dominique was on the front lines of this fight to figure out just what the league owed to the people who used to play the sport. I mean, he sat in some really contentious meetings across the table from the league's lawyers.
I mean, it was incredibly difficult because what was uncovered at that time was not just the connection between CTE and dementia and Alzheimer's, and there was also the idea that they knew way before we did and had actively hit it. And it's not only just the head injury stuff, it's also like the quality of life for everybody from all the other things that happen to your body. And so it's infuriating. It can be infuriating to be in a negotiation with them where we're arguing for longer health care or better consideration for long-term injuries. And either they push back against it or they try to take it out of the salary cap, which is like the money that's allotted for us to negotiate for our salaries, which is like so un-American. That's a whole nother ball of wax, the existence of the salary cap in the draft and all those constraints that exist. But it's hard to have those conversations, and their actions, like so clearly in many cases, show that they don't respect us as anything more than pieces to a machine that can be subbed in and subbed out. And in the background, we're learning more and more about how they try to hide information from us. And you mentioned what happens to players, so many players after they retire and so young. But I think it's important to point out that it's not just that some of their brains deteriorate and some of them have to get knee and hip replacements and all that stuff. It's also that their brains deteriorate to the point where shooting themselves in the chest is the best option that they see. Like there's a lot of suicides, and the shooting themselves in the chest part is important because they want to leave their brains unaffected in order to be studied.
Right. Junior Seau, I think famously, like when he killed himself, Junior Seau is one of the greatest middle linebackers in the history of the sport. When he killed himself, he shot himself in the chest, and if I'm not mistaken, he left a note, right, saying, "Please study my brain." Like it was really, you could see sort of both like the sort of force, like he knew something was wrong, and he couldn't figure out what it was, and also he had like the whole situation was very just heartbreaking.
It's unimaginable darkness for me. And it's something that I think none of us really think about. Well, I can't speak for everyone, but most of us probably don't think about what it would take for you, how you might have to feel for you to think that that's the best alternative, particularly someone who's lived a life that a lot of people would want to have. And so like having that, and there's no reason I think for most people to think about that, but having someone go through that, like, forced me to, like, wonder how bad it must feel and then go into negotiations with people who are like, nah, you don't deserve that. You don't deserve, in so many words, you don't deserve longer-term health care. And, yeah, so it's a tough spot to be in.
I mean, so there's two dynamics that seem like really that jump out to me just as someone who's never been in, like, I can only imagine what it's like to be in those rooms. One is that when you were playing, I think every owner in the league was white. I think Shahid Khan came later. He's Pakistani American. But of the 32 owners of NFL teams, they're all white. And if you own an NFL team, that means, like, on the low end of wealth, you're worth, a couple $100 million. But like if you own a team, if you're the majority own the team, your wealth is you're probably a billionaire. And so you're a young black dude sitting across the table from this sort of cadre of white billionaires and their representatives. And you're arguing with them about these things that affect your livelihood and your health down the road. But also the other part of football that's like so jarring, my wife talks about this all the time, it's just how martial it is, like at every, like how much sort of the language and sort of grammar of military stuff is like baked into the way football is presented to us. And it seems like, I'm not going to get too macabre and say that y'all are cannon fodder, but like it does feel like there is a culture of not speaking up that is also exacerbated by the fact that your contracts aren't guaranteed, right? And so it feels like there's a lot of like good soldier sort of mythologizing, right? Next man up, all that stuff. I'm just wondering how those two different but not unrelated dynamics sort of play out when you're sort of arguing with these people about really important issues.
Football is only popular in America, which, like, again, makes for another, like, perfect metaphor. It's insanely popular here because it kind of is America. Like, and from the racial dynamics to the class dynamics to the cronyism and nepotism that, like, benefits a select group. Like, it is America. And so, like, it's hard not to see those parallels. And when you're sitting in those rooms and you're having conversations with the owners. And so, like, I try my best not to, like make personal, like, assessments of anybody. Like, I don't know what's going on inside you.
It's a safe space, though.
Oh, yeah. No, I get it. I guess the point I'm making is, or the point I'm trying to make is, they have so much power and privilege. And I think they believe, like a lot of people who've had a lot of success in America, they believe that it's because of them. Mm-hmm. And giving any of that up feels like something is being stolen from them. And it feels like we don't deserve it in their view. And I don't think that's very different from like general fights about race and class in America. It's like if you interviewed owner and frankly, if you read their mind, like if you asked them, do you want these players to live healthy, happy lives and be rich and be successful and not have any issues with their brain or body, I feel fully confident that they would answer all those questions the right way. But then if you ask them, what are you willing to give up to make sure that happens? Like, that's where you realize that they don't actually care about that. And again, like that feels like having conversations about race or class with anyone powerful in America. But then it's like, all right, what price are you willing to pay to ensure that this thing that you say that you want happens? And not only are they not willing to pay a price, they'll fight to ensure that that no one pays that price, because that means giving something up.
When we come back,
my college roommate that I was talking about is also, he has ailments from college, but since that's not a job, he can't even get workers' comp. He's going to have his hip replaced also, and his knee probably replaced also. And he had his finger shattered. He had all this stuff, and he didn't even play in the NFL.
Stay with us.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Saatva, maker of quality, handcrafted mattresses. Founder and CEO Ron Rutson shares one of their core values.
At Saatva, we believe sleep does unlock a superpower. When you wake up and you're totally refreshed, you go after things more. And it all starts with being on the right mattress. And that's what Saatva has been inspired by from the day that we started.
Save up to $600 through President's Day at saatva.com/NPR.
This message comes from Charles Schwab. When it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it. You can also invest on your own and trade on Thinkorswim. Visit schwab.com to learn more. This message comes from NPR sponsor IKEA. IKEA is hitting the snooze button on everything but rest and sleep. Why not turn your bedroom into the space to decompress? Shop the IKEA range of comfy beds, pillows, mood lighting, and so much more. Every time you step in there, it's nothing but me time. Sounds like a dream, right? IKEA has what you need to design a bedroom you'll never want to leave. Create your comfy, blissful bedroom today with the IKEA 6 Sleep Essentials. Shop in-store or go to ikea-usa.com/sleep. This message comes from NPR sponsor REI Co-op. You can't make more time, but when you opt outside, you can make the most of it. So make time for those early mornings, last-minute trips, and timeless views. For small victories, big fails, and everything in between. And when you're ready, REI has the gear, clothing, classes, and advice to help you make the most of your time out there. Visit your local REI Co-op or rei.com/opt-outside. This message comes from CarMax. CarMax knows that finding the right car is all about exploring your options, like the option to shop your way on your schedule. At CarMax, you can browse, compare, and pre-qualify online, then finish up at the store, or simply start on the lot. The choice is yours, because at CarMax, you're in the driver's seat. Start the search for your next car today at CarMax, the way car buying should be.
Gene, just Gene this time. Code Switch. We've been talking to Dominique Foxworth, who is a former NFL player, former head of the NFL Players Association, a podcaster currently. We've been talking to him about playing the game he loved and the costs that came with that. In his role as the head of the union, he was often, squaring off with the league's owners and their lawyers about this question of what the league owed to its overwhelmingly black universe of former players. And Dominique said, when you're playing, you're constantly being reminded of just how dangerous the sport is.
I played in a game where Kevin Everett was paralyzed. I played in a game where a player for the 49ers, Thomas Harrion, I think his name was, after the game, he died in the locker room.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it was a preseason game for the Broncos. We all walked off the field, and an ambulance came down to the visitors' locker room, and I didn't pay it any mind, but I went home. By the time I got home, I learned he had died. Like, this is the game we're playing, and I play in a game where, like, I'm going to have a knee and hip replacement at some point. And I was a cornerback. Like, I wasn't, like, a linebacker. And
you were in the trenches. You weren't a defensive lineman yet. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I have former colleagues who also play cornerback who one of the things that I brought up recently is his wife called my wife because he had barricaded himself in a house with a loaded gun because he was having like some I can't diagnose it, but like I think it's reasonable to assume that an otherwise healthy young former football player is having some like impact of CTE. Like these are the risks that we take by playing this game. And like when I was coming up, we didn't know those were the risks. Now we know they're the risk, and those risks are there. There's no cap on that risk, but they still say that you can't have this much money, or we'll put a salary cap on. There's only 5 years of health care after you're retired from football. And mind you, you have to be vested. You have to have played 3 years and 3 games to become a vested player to then only get 5 years of health care, which like I'm way past that, and my knee and hip replacement aren't coming for a long time. So like that health care does not help me. So like that's really hard for me, man. And it's like, I don't know. I get emotional generally, and I get aggressive and yelly, and I don't know that works, but I don't know how to subtract the emotion from this when you see how crazy some of this is.
You just said, you know that there's probably a knee replacement in the offing, probably a hip replacement in your future. Looking back on it, knowing what you know now, do you feel like it was worth it?
Absolutely. So that's the thing. That's the hard thing. Is for me, if I wouldn't have gotten a second contract, no, I would have said it wasn't worth it. And I came very close to not getting that contract. I got traded to Atlanta the year after Vic went to jail, and I was at the bottom of the depth chart, and I thought this team was going to be terrible. We happened to have a good season, and I played the best year of my life, and the Ravens ended up paying me off of that. So that changed everything for me. Like I can say these things in part because I have financial security. And like I can send my kids to good schools. Like I can do all the things that people dream of doing for their families. Like I bought my mom a house, my mom and my dad a house. Like I do all that, buy them cars, send them on vacation. Like I do all the cool things that we all imagine or we all dream about doing when we dream about being an athlete. But the question that comes up in my mind often is the darkness that you have to be in order to shoot yourself. I've never felt that. So obviously, not every player gets to that point, and obviously I hope I never get to that point. But I can't imagine that it would feel worth it then.
We reached out to the NFL for comment about Dominique's claims that the league didn't value its players' health and safety. Their spokesperson wrote back, quote, "We disagree. The NFL and its clubs are committed to the health, mental wellness, and safety of players throughout their careers and beyond." The spokesperson went on to say, quote, "We know there is no finish line when it comes to the health and safety of players and are committed to find ways to continue to make the game safer." End quote. If you or someone you know may be considering suicide or is in crisis, call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Next week, how the NFL agreed to a settlement to pay former players with brain disease. But there have been hurdles to getting those payouts, including the use of tests that discriminated against Black players.
So if you were a Black player and you were a white player and you got the exact same score on a cognitive test, the white player potentially would qualify for a payment, the Black player would not. And the problem was, this was, from the perspective of former players and their lawyers, is that they didn't know they were agreeing to this.
All right, that That's our show. You can follow us on Instagram at NPR Code Switch. That's all one word. If email is more your thing, ours is codeswitch@npr.org. And subscribe to the podcast on the NPR app or, wherever it is you get your podcast. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. It's very, very dope. You can do that by going to npr.org/codeswitch newsletter. And just a reminder that signing up for Code Switch Plus is a great way to support our show and to support public media. And bonus, you get to listen to every episode sponsor free. Go find out more at plus.npr.org/codeswitch. This episode was produced by Xavier Lopez and James Sneed. It was edited by Dahlia Mortada, Courtney Stein, and Jasmine Romero. Our engineer was James Willits. And we'd be remiss if we did not shout out the rest of the Code Switch Massive. That's Christina Kala, Jess Kung, Leah Danella, Veerlyn Williams, and B.A. Parker. As for me, I'm Gene Demby. Be easy, y'all.
This message comes from Homes.com. You don't just live in your home, you live in your neighborhood as well. So when you're shopping for a home, you want to know as much about the area around it as possible. Luckily, Homes.com has got you covered. Each listing features a comprehensive neighborhood guide from local experts. Everything you'd ever want to know about a neighborhood, including the number of homes for sale, local amenities, and even things like median lot size and a noise score. Homes.com. We've done your homework.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. AI needs lots of speed and computing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling? Upgrade to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. OCI is the blazing fast and secure platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI workloads. Now, till the end of March 31st, 2025, new U.S. customers with a minimum financial commitment can cut their current cloud bill in half. See if your company qualifies at oracle.com/NPR.